Welcome to the Estate of Minds podcast. Joining me today, we've got a person at the real coalface of the industry, previously growth officer and head of growth and performance for Ray White. She's been a growth manager for Remax. She's seen a lot. She's worn so many hats in the industry. She's the director and entrepreneur for Recruit RE. And this is a fantastic new platform, people, that you've got to get your hands on. There's so many exclusive real estate opportunities on this thing, empowering job seekers, and I'm really blessed to have this person on the couch today. So welcome, Katie Cotton, welcome to Estate of Minds.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Katie, now that you're part of the industry in a very, very different kind of area, this is a really rare opportunity I get to speak to someone in the recruitment sector about the industry, and it's rarely spoken about. And honestly, recruitment is one of those words that sometimes does have a bit of taboo in the industry. For every agent posting wins online, there's a long list of people who quietly disappear into the real estate ether. So my first question for you today is, are we failing the industry? Or is it just a misunderstood part, real estate-wise, this recruitment sector?
Do you know, I'm going to answer first by saying recruitment is hard. Recruitment is hard for businesses, but recruitment is also hard for the job seekers and the candidates applying.
Yeah.
So I think the reality is it is a little bit of a misunderstood industry. Mm-hmm. It is a facade. You know, it looks pretty and it looks fancy and it looks like a lot of fun, and then the reality often sets in. I think sometimes the way in which we articulate what it is that we're after, or how a job seeker is able to identify what they would like to do or be in their career, makes it challenging.
Everyone talks about, though, the wins, the commissions, the lifestyle, but not many people are really talking about what happens behind the scenes when people enter into the industry. So, I mean, we're seeing so many people leave the industry. The attrition rate is absolutely terrible, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You know, I recently spoke as a keynote speaker at a conference, and I talked a lot around the real estate industry and the tenure. And the tenure once was around 18 months. And now we talk about those high turnover roles such as property management or administration, not necessarily salespeople per se. That now is heading towards 15 months. But the future predicted tenure is likely to be less than 11 months.
Are we overselling then the dream of real estate?
I think we are, as I mentioned earlier, not able to articulate what it is that we need in our business. So we have an idea of what's going to solve the problem, whether that be a property manager support person, but in fact what we need is another property manager. So what happens is we put out a role, that role shifts, that person becomes unhappy because it's not what they thought.
Yes.
Or there's no progression maybe
Right.
from the other end. And so I think it's that disconnect that causes a lot of this change.
Yes.
And sometimes we overpromise and underdeliver in real estate. It's really common.
You talk about they.
Yes.
We're they.
We are they.
So what
We're
what should we be articulating then to the industry?
Yeah, I think I often talk to businesses around getting job descriptions in place, but this is not just going to ChatGPT and saying, write a job description for me. It is about working out what are the problems you need to solve in your business and what does that person need to have as a skill set in order to solve that problem. Now, that doesn't always mean that they have to have done everything on that list, because I'm a huge believer in energy is more than skill. We can teach the role of real estate. We cannot teach energy.
It's very true.
But if we were to advertise a role different to what someone was going to do, it will never work.
You've kind of like answered my next question, because it's something that we poll the students in regards to what they want to hear on these things, because we put this content as part of our curriculum as well as our social media. So when students are actually doing the course, they're actually seeing us discussing these kinds of things. And it makes kind of sense in their preliminary research, their due diligence for getting into the industry. And some of the candidates do obviously believe, you know, that the industry does paint a false impression because they see the suits, they see the nice cars and so forth there. Has social media got a lot to answer for?
I think so. I love social media. I'm a huge poster on social media. I think we post what we want people to see.
Yes.
But the reality is, it doesn't happen in a day. These people that are posting success stories, who are successful real estate agents or business owners or property managers or BDMs, have worked really hard to
definitely.
achieve that. So I don't know that social media is the reason, but I do think, Victor, that it works both ways. When I talk about a business articulating what the role is, that also comes down to a candidate putting in their resume true and accurate information. We do rely on technology. We do rely on AI to help us, which I'm a huge advocate for, but you must use it the right way. Telling somebody that you have real estate experience when you don't will actually only work against you, not for you.
Agreed.
You are better to talk about the skills that might help you, whether you've worked in customer service with McDonald's, whether you've worked, as a cafe or a bartender, or, what have you done to allow you to have those skills to manage and talk to people, which is what our role is in real estate.
But the industry is also hiring people that genuinely have experience. So what about the candidates who are new and don't have that experience? This is where there is a bit of a catch-22. A lot of the candidates or graduates that I speak to are telling me, I kind of have to lie on my resume a little bit in regards to sales experience and gelling it towards my real estate career in order to get through the doors. How would you perceive that being?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that when people finish their real estate course, they do believe that that is enough to get them in the industry.
Yes.
And that is where there's a little bit of misunderstanding. I think they need to look for those entry-level roles, which there are a number. You and I have spoken about this a few times. The field support officer roles, the assistant property manager roles, the receptionist roles.
Yes.
All of those roles that allow you a start, a sales associate
Foundational
role.
roles, yeah.
All of those, but they're hard, right? They're not pretty.
No.
They're not what people are seeing. So they're not the first take-up in terms of a role.
Yeah.
But that's where you have to start.
Absolutely. We encourage that too. And just so you know that we don't paint a pretty picture always of the industry. We are very realistic with our students, to the detriment sometimes of people not doing the course. But I would prefer to get people coming into the course that are going to obviously want to make this a real career. I do say to a lot of the graduates as well, get in. It doesn't matter at what level. Get your head in there. And I also say sometimes those foundational roles that you just spoke about, they might not be as glamorous, but they're great opportunities, aren't they?
Yes. And they are also an opportunity to grow inside of a business, which is where we get better tenure. Where we get people to stay in these businesses for a longer period of time.
Definitely.
Where it's a journey. I would always say to somebody, if you were sales associates are entry level. And also the reality does have to come to salespeople who want experienced sales associates.
Yes.
Because those experienced sales associates want to be agents.
Correct.
Right? They don't want to be sales associates. So the job is find someone with the energy. And I know before you touched on, the resume, and sometimes they feel like they need to possibly not lie, but maybe paint a different, exaggerate. I think it's about focusing on the skills that you need. So instead of telling someone that you've worked in a real estate business, talk about, have you ever cold called before? Have you ever had to make phone calls without knowing who is going to answer on the other end? Have you had to use a system, whether it be Microsoft or Google? People want to know that you have the ability to use certain things. Canva, everybody uses Canva.
Indeed,
Have you used that? Have you done an online course? What have you got that you can put forward to someone and say, I am happy to learn? But also, if we think about sales associates, it's not a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job.
It's not.
And even as a property manager, it's hard.
Indeed. Yeah.
And as a receptionist, sometimes you can't walk out. Right at that time, you have to just hang around or help at auctions. So it's about going that extra mile, which will give you the opportunity, not necessarily in those entry-level roles having real estate experience per se.
Yeah, and And let me clarify there, just for everyone
Yes.
listening, that I'm not encouraging anyone to embellish, but I think
Yeah.
that if you have a sales background or whatever, there should be something around that in the resume there, because that acumen of being good at sales, good at building relationships, all those things are great tools that they should be putting in their resumes. But you touched on a very valid point there. I think that the industry is crying out for experienced people, and sometimes to the detriment of new graduates, they do get pushed to the side, and maybe sometimes they're not highlighting some of those skills a little bit more on the resume to get through the doors. As a recruiter yourself as well, do you find that that you want new people in the industry?
Absolutely. I think everybody wants new people, and everybody knows, every business knows that there is an element of time and money that it takes to bring in new. But when you do bring in new, you are supporting the growth in the industry, and sometimes, you know, I certainly don't say that it's not a great trait to be in the industry for 30 years, but things change. You know, I think an experienced property manager now has 6 months experience.
Yeah, wow.
You know, that's wild to think that back in the day you would say I wouldn't employ anyone with less than 5 years experience in the industry.
Yeah.
So I think everyone is very open to that. But I also think if you expect to just apply on platforms like Seek for a job as an entry level, it won't work. You need to get out there. You need to have conversations. You need to door knock businesses. And there were many at Ray White Ascot that had door knocked. A very, very successful associate that works for an amazing agent now inside of that business. And he did. He popped in with his resume. And my theory was, if you can make the effort to come in here and introduce yourself with your resume, I will give you an interview.
Kudos to them, and I encourage that too.
Yeah.
A lot of people come to us, say they get rejected and so forth. They're applying for jobs on Seek. But I think it is, and you correctly, and I'm glad that you've said this publicly, because I do encourage a lot of our graduates to go and seek out the people that they want to work with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of agencies, and being an ex-principal myself, I know that I'm always on the lookout for good people.
Always.
And sometimes having that kind of credential and coming to us and being proactive and taking that initiative is really, really important. And you can't teach that.
You can't teach that. And you're right. But you know what? Not every person is for every business, and not every business is for every person. So I've spoken to some of your students before and given them the same advice. Go and work out where you would like to work.
Yeah.
Now, everybody wants to work in Ascot, and everybody wants to sell the $30 million homes on Hamilton Hill.
Of course.
I get it, right?
Yeah,
Sounds fun. It's a lot of work.
It is, yeah.
You know, but go and work out where it is that you want to work. Go and work out some of the businesses that you think you align with. A lot of the time people will then just try and find a role because it's there, and they'll say, I don't mind travelling. And this is... I grew up in Ipswich. You know, we joke about it all the time. Have all my teeth.
Nothing wrong with Ipswich?
Yes, nothing wrong with Ipswich. I live in Moggill now. There's only a river that separates me. But, you know, the reality is if you are travelling from Ipswich every day to the Sunshine Coast, you won't do that for long. Everybody will tell you that they want to travel until they have to do it. You need to find a radius of where you're comfortable.
Agreed.
If traffic increases, we are in a busy, busy state.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's only going to get busier.
Yes.
So 20 minutes today could be an hour and a half
Absolutely,
tomorrow.
yeah.
And that's the exhausting part. That is another contributing factor to tenure is people will say, well, the role's there, I'll take it.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I leave at 6 and I get home at 7 and
It's
my day is
exhausting.
gone, and that is exhausting.
Yeah, it is. And it does wear you down. Anyone that says it doesn't, I think, is a liar. I don't think there's anyone out
Yes,
there that doesn't like sitting in traffic.
I did it, but I would argue I am the exception to most. I did it for a long, long time when I worked, you know, for Remax and Ray White. But it is exhausting.
Yeah, it is. A good point that you mentioned there as well, you know, the $30 million properties are great, but most of the successful agents cut their teeth on a lot cheaper properties. You know, we're talking a demographic probably of anywhere between a $600,000 property and $1 million tends to be that biggest demographic. I certainly was one of those agents. I made my money doing that. I didn't make my money selling $30 million properties. And I think a lot of people see the glamorous side of social media and, and I'd be one putting that kind of, social media out there if I'd sold a $10 million property or whatever that might be. But for every property that we've kind of sold there's hundreds that have gone before it that was selling for a much less price. So it's not always what you see and what you're kind of seeing in the media that is the true portrayal of the industry. And that brings me to the next question. Is the industry doing enough to train people, or is it still very much a sink or swim mentality?
That's a great question. And the reason I say it's a great question is when I opened up, I said recruitment's hard, training's equally as hard because it's time. And time is the one thing that we can't get any more of.
True.
We only have so many hours
Correct.
in a day.
Yeah.
I don't believe that there is enough training out there for the new to industry. I think there are a number of places at the moment who are really trying to embed themselves in that space to help.
Yes.
There is a lot of support when we talk about getting agents from one level to the next. There is a lot of support or training around getting a property manager to manage more properties under management and being able to manage a team. But there is not a lot out there in terms of sales associates. There's not a lot out there to say, here are some of the skills that you would need that would help you coming into real estate without having that experience. Where's the line, I think, is what you look at. But, work experience is still an option. You cannot do it. There's some legislation around how long you can do
Correct.
that. But you can do a trial. You could reach out to someone and spend a day and see if that's something that you like to do, because I think it would give you a clearer understanding of the role.
Yeah.
But I do think you have to also do your own.
It's lovely to hear,
research.
Katie, that the recruitment industry is echoing what we're really talking to our graduates about. So there is a great connection between the two, and that's one of the reasons why we love working with you, because you do encourage a lot of our students and also, empower them as well to go and do those little initiatives and go and do those little things. So, hats off to you in that regards, because you're telling them good things. And I think that sometimes the industry has enough stigma. It has enough bad news. We've all heard it recently. And, it also resonates that sometimes. Unfortunately, we always hear the horror stories.
Always. We don't see the media coming out there and writing a good news story about
Unfortunately,
an amazing sales associate
Absolutely,
coming in,
yeah.
brand
and then
new.
and then you see an agent putting their success story online, and then everyone's preaching wanker,
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. Tall
It
poppy,
is. Couldn't agree more. I think there's some great agents and businesses out there that do focus on a lot of training. They do want to build great cultures, but it's also being able to articulate what culture means. It's not just saying you have a great one.
True. Culture's a big word, and it's tossed around a lot in our industry. And unfortunately, there is a toxicity around culture in real estate a lot. A lot of sales associates getting burnt out quite quickly, people leaving the industry in 12 months, not being able to go anywhere or move around or not get the training, as we said. So if someone joins the wrong agency, though, how much damage do they do to their career? Because I see a lot of agents do tend to kind of jump around a bit. Is that detrimental on the resume?
I suppose that it's hard to say whether it's truly detrimental if it's a single occurrence. I think the struggle comes when people leave a business, or say one of your students starts at a business and then goes to another one and says it didn't work out, for whatever reason, and they move on and then they're really quite successful, versus the person that says, the culture's bad in that business.
Yes.
Because the reality is, I think it works both ways. And there's always three sides to every story, isn't there? And
Absolutely.
there's the businesses, the truth in the middle, and then the students
absolutely.
there. But I think it's a really hard one to answer, because people are hard. Like,
The industry does have a lot to answer for in regards to, it is tough.
yeah,
The hours are tough.
yeah.
Alone,
Yeah.
that alone is it wears people down.
And when I say people are hard, I mean everybody doesn't like being told what to do.
Certainly.
And that is real estate. I think we're becoming better. We are realising that things aren't the way that they used to be. We are realising that there are better and easier ways. We don't have to make people do that hard work that we used to. We actually have technology now to save people door knocking in 45-degree days.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that door knocking is not important, but what I'm saying is that we've got better ways and we're not trying to break them because they're people.
Yeah.
You know, our job is to teach them the right way so that they
Absolutely.
become successful and they stay,
Sure.
not leave and jump from position to position.
But there's also, to some degree, there should be a little bit of toughening up, because I don't think that the door knocking that I did, the mail drops and so forth, I delivered my own mails a lot of the time to these mailboxes, and it's a good way to lose a bit of weight, guys. But it was also something that it taught me tenacity. It taught me to have the right temperament, patience, all those things. And sometimes some of the best relationships that I still have to this day were made from doing that. Some of the people never sold a property with me.
Yeah.
But I used to go and visit this lady in New Farm and cut her roses for her, and she'd give me some. And I can tell you to this day, people, I've never smelt, any better roses like
amazing
it.
Roses.
And ironically, those relationships stuck with me, because when that lady passed, her estate was left to me to sell for her.
Yeah.
And we were talking 11, 12 properties.
Yeah.
So you just never know who you're going to meet on those travels. And sometimes I think we get caught up in the social media, in the office a little bit, and we're not getting face-to-face enough. Are you finding that from new graduates?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually spoke to somebody the other day just about this, and it was a BDM role, not in a real estate business per se, and we were talking about what the job would entail. And they had said to me they're working from home every day. And I said, so not going out, we looking at adding a car allowance, like what's the plan?
Yeah.
And they said, no, in the office. And I said, so every meeting is online. Everyone is just a phone call or an online meeting. And I said, and I think that's hard because there has to be an element of face-to-face. Ray White are really great at this. They want to be at the dining room table. They focus a lot of their marketing around that because it's important to be able to get face-to-face to build that rapport and build that relationship.
Yeah.
There are so many things that you can do digitally. There are so many things that you can do via a phone call or online.
Yeah.
But there is also a huge amount of things that need to be done face-to-face.
Absolutely. And is that getting lost now a little bit more?
I don't know that it's getting
I'm seeing
lost.
a lot more people not picking up the phone.
I think people are getting complacent.
Yeah.
It's not that it's lost. They know they have to do it. They're actually just getting complacent with things just turning over. We use DocuSign. It saves us time. We don't have to go and drive to get contracts.
It's convenient, yeah.
But I do think there's some times in which it's important that you do that in person. You have to pick. The elderly lady that you talk about, she probably wouldn't have wanted it sent via DocuSign.
She wouldn't even know how to turn on a computer.
But I do think it does come down to, at the moment, work ethic and people actually wanting to do the tasks and getting up and committing to that. And that is where we find big struggles, because telling me that you want to make 75 phone calls today and actually making 75 phone calls today are two very different things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where the disconnect is. It's not about the training. It's not about the social media. It's about the fact that you say you want to, but then you don't want to, and that's the struggle.
Absolutely. And that's getting lost with a lot of people. They think they've done a really big day's work. And we've talked about this with both my previous guests. What is defined as a big day in real estate? And I can guarantee you our perception maybe compared to someone new in the industry would be very different.
Yeah.
And that's where there's a disconnect sometimes.
Agreed. And every business is different. I know businesses that would make sales associates make 300 calls a day. I know businesses that are happy for them to make 50 phone calls a day. It's all relative to what they're trying to achieve.
Yes.
I think the way in which we determine how a day is productive are the results. So if you are able to make phone calls, if you are able to connect with people, if you are able to book appraisals, that's a successful day.
They're the tick skills,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
If you are a property manager and you are able to do all of your tasks in one day and we don't have complaints from tenants and landlords, that's a successful day.
Absolutely.
But if we go home and we've not booked appraisals, we've not done our phone calls, we've got 14 emails with complaints. Well, we're probably not doing it.
Yeah.
Now, those are not necessarily tasks that the new to industry would do, but it is, as I said earlier, going that over and above, going that extra mile. No one's asking for slave labor, but what we're asking is for people to show that initiative and say, if you got to 5 o'clock, we're talking a lot about sales and I've spent a lot of my time in that sales space, but if it got to 5 o'clock and you'd only made 50 phone calls and you'd spoken to 15 people and you hadn't booked an appraisal, do you go home or do you make a few extra phone calls and see? That's the difference in terms of the energy that people have in this industry.
Yeah. And it's lacking a little bit because that 51st call that they might have made might have been that connect.
I have a 21-year-old. I know exactly what it's like to have, and we have our challenges. And I created 3 mini versions of myself, so I have no one else to blame bar myself. But I get that we want to go out and we want to be social and we want to have fun and all of these types of things. But we also have to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also have to work for a long time.
And you only reap what you sow, right? So.
And I think too, that's also coming in for people going, what is the role that you want to do? If you are a very task, process-driven person, sales is probably not for you. It's very autonomous. It's it's flexible. It requires you to have the energy behind what you do.
Discipline as well.
The discipline. Whereas the property management, here is your task for the day. Here is what you need to do. Here are the emails that you need to reply to.
Yeah. That's what I love about real estate, though. There are such a dynamic industry.
Yeah, so many options.
And it shoots so many people too. You know, people ask me all the time, "Do I have to be extroverted to be in real estate?" Absolutely not.
No.
There's so many skills and so many areas of real estate that you can be in, and it is such a dynamic industry. We're sport for choice in that regard.
We are. There are so many roles. We look at things now where there's social media roles, content creator roles.
Yeah.
There are a lot of roles created
Absolutely,
in real estate outside of what the standard scope.
Important stakeholders in the team as well,
Correct.
right? Because that's where the trends are now,
Yeah.
right? So.
But we see a lot of people transition from receptionist roles into property management because a receptionist will often be given some tasks to help support
Great
a property
point.
management team. So that becomes a role that instantly would give you an opportunity to move into the property management space.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage our graduates to do reception and those kinds of roles because I think we alluded to it earlier in the interview that we spoke about being in those foundational roles. But sometimes I've seen people go into real estate and they're hell-bent on being a sales agent. But then they've kind of done these kind of smaller roles in the office and realise, oh, geez, I'm not sure if I would be suited to there.
Yeah.
But because I've been at this little hub in the office, I've been able to, resonate more with maybe property management or BDMs or whatever. So you get an opportunity to see a lot being in those foundational roles, don't you?
Absolutely. We also see that transition of sales associates to BDM roles.
Yes.
We do see that often because it's still in the sales space, but it is a little bit more structured. So we see a lot of those. I don't personally, and I'm sure someone will tell me if it's untrue, but I don't often see salespeople go to property management roles or vice versa because they are two very different types of skill sets that are needed.
Indeed.
So we don't often see it. I'm not saying it never happens.
No.
I think you'll find some of those agents that start their own businesses.
Yes.
They have to learn property management.
Correct.
We don't have any money.
They're running the rent rolls, right? Recruit RE, Katie. Convince me in 30 seconds why I should pay you instead of doing it myself. You've probably heard this many times.
Oh my God.
Sell me this pen, Katie.
Sell me this pen. There's a wonderful little pitch about that. Do you know I can get up there and talk in front of thousands of people and do a keynote speaking opportunity and ask me to pitch and I'll chuck a tantrum and throw myself on the ground. But Recruit RE, it's certainly been a journey, but it is Seek for Real Estate. It is the place where we now hold all of the real estate specific jobs. It's an opportunity to link candidates with business owners and allow a platform to match people based on the right role for them. It's asking better questions. It's understanding people in a better way. It's not just relying on a chatbot to do your resume and put it forward and hope that it shortlists you and someone relies on that. There is no place as it stands that just focuses on the real estate industry.
I love the fact that you've done this, because I think that there was a certain hole in the market there, and you've filled it beautifully by doing this. And I know you've had a few starts with this, and you've toyed with it, and you've planned it now and re-evolved it and so forth, and now it's your idea. You're founding this new kind of concept on this platform. So well done, and our congratulations on that. And you'll hear more about this, guys. I'll put the details in the below and how you can connect there with Katie and her team in regards to this. So rest assured, don't worry, there's more coming. But in regards to that, what problem does your company solve that the industry probably wasn't solving before?
I think that one of the problems we have is that there's actually no shortage of roles at all. Across a 12-month period, across a number of platforms, we could say Seek and Indeed and LinkedIn, it's about 25,000 roles that are associated with the real estate industry across Australia that are advertised.
It's a healthy industry, isn't it?
There is not a shortage of roles. That is not the problem. The problem is that we are not advertising the role that we need, which means we are not getting the right candidate.
Right.
We are not having the right processes in our business in terms of leadership, which means we're not having the tenure, which means the turnover is very high, which means we are in some cases replacing a role twice in a 12-month period.
Wow.
And that's the challenge. And so what needed to happen was a better way to link people in the industry, a better way to, as an example, if you advertised an executive assistant role in real estate, you will find that 60% of the applications will be people that are outside of the real estate industry applying for that role. Now, the biggest task that you will do as an executive assistant in real estate to an agent are Form 6s and contracts for sale. So if you don't have that experience, that is majority of your task that you are doing and you need to understand.
Absolutely.
And that is not something that an agent would sacrifice. So I think that is one of the challenges that we have with these other platforms, is that they are very generic.
Yes.
And we needed something that was going to be a little bit more unique to the industry that we are.
Have you given us that?
Yes. It's being rebuilt actually on some exciting news. So completely from scratch rebuilt.
Wow.
So if you ask me that question in 3 months' time, I will answer you confidently and tell you. So we're still
Exciting
running.
news.
We're still running, and we're still certainly helping people and assisting them in that journey. But I wanted to make it better.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're doing.
And hats off to you too, because I know you're a bit of a perfectionist, and I've known Katie a little while now, and I can say that hand on heart, and it's not an insult by any means.
No.
I think it's a great thing that you're kind of evolving it, and things have changed a lot in the last 12 months as well.
Yeah.
So I think the industry's evolving, and so you've got to evolve with it.
Yeah. I'm very passionate about real estate, and I'm very passionate about the recruitment and making sure that we find the right people for our businesses. And I think I said that line earlier, not every business is for every person, and not every person is for every business. And there will continue to be challenges. I'm no magic maker. I can't say that there will never be a challenge.
Yeah.
But if we know now, or we have the support to work out what it is that we need, and that person has the opportunity to list their skill sets, not just relying on technology to do that, I think it is. We're in a hard space at the moment because we are relying on AI, and I love it and I use it and it's important. But if you are relying on that to shortlist all of your candidates solely, then you're going to struggle and you're not going to find.
Yeah, I think we're in that place at the moment where AI is fantastic and it can be an efficiently awesome tool, but I still think there's a human element that needs to be there, almost like we need a hybrid model at the moment, and that's what you guys do. So
Correct.
That's the perfect kind of combination,
Yes.
I think, there. Why do most agencies get recruitment wrong, though? And they try to do it themselves, don't they?
Yeah.
Is that where they get it wrong?
They get it wrong because it often becomes something urgent. When you have someone resign on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend that may be, 3 public holidays, or maybe it was Easter, we finish on a Thursday, we have four days of public holidays, and it all of a sudden becomes urgent.
Of course.
So their entire mindset, instead of being about getting the right person, is just to fill the spot.
Yes.
And I know that's hard. I do, because sometimes we don't have capacity to take on that role. But what we should have in our business is at least people that can support that role.
Correct.
We need to have at least enough. We shouldn't be running that thin that we don't have anyone to support that while we find the right person.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because I speak to a lot of principals on a daily basis, and I've almost kind of said to them, you need to have some risk mitigation there. Almost be able to cover every single person.
Yeah.
Where you can, obviously.
Or even having a property manager that is managing possibly all the new ones that come in, and they will always have some capacity. But at a point, you need to make that decision that you need to then put on another. We should never be hiring because we are being reactive. We should be hiring because we're being proactive.
I totally agree.
We can't control resignations, but we can control how we run our business. And I think the people inside of your business are the best recruiters for your business. And if they are happy, they will shout that to the world. If they're not happy, they won't.
As a successful businesswoman yourself, an entrepreneur, what are some of the non-negotiable standards that you won't compromise on, even if it costs you business? Because in our industry, I think a lot of people don't. They compromise almost too willy-nilly to get the business.
I think I'm assuming you're referring about the people in which we take into a role.
Into what you do with Recruit RE, yeah.
I think the platform is obviously allowing people to do this automatically. We're trying not to be that manual. We're not recruiters. We're not individually talking to people to find out what their skill set is. We are relying on the platform to do that for them and work with them and ask questions. But I do think adding in technology the right way. So I'll give you a great example. There's a Recruit RE AI assistant there at the moment. And the job of that assistant is not just for you to ask a random question and to create it like we do with ChatGPT. The idea is that it will say to you, what role would you like to advertise today, Victor? You can say, look, I'm looking for a sales assistant in my business, 70,000 plus super. And it will say, amazing. Could you please let us know some of the tasks that would be required? Is this a Monday to Friday job? Is this full time? Does it include super or is it plus super?
Right.
We're asking the questions about the role so that we have a really clear understanding. They're the non-negotiables. Stop hiding the information that we need to share. Stop hiding the salary. I am so very, very passionate about this because I can tell you comfortably I would not apply for a role if there was no salary added to it. And if you are hiding the salary because you don't want your own internal team to see what you're paying someone because you don't want them to ask for that money, you have a bigger problem than just hiring a new person in your business.
Correct.
And that may sound blunt, but that is the other reason why tenure is changing and you're losing good people in businesses. It must be fair and equitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great advice for employers out there, principals out there, because I think, you do definitely have bigger problems if that is the case. So have you ever walked away from working with an agency because they would burn through people? Because obviously you see who's using your platform and who's probably shouldn't be using your platform. Bit of a controversial question.
I don't know that it's ever saying walking away. I think it's just being able to give some insights. And like I said, because we're not recruiters per se, I'm not competition to those guys going out individually trying to get this business. My job is to create a platform to make that process easier.
Correct.
When we are advertising so many roles. So I don't know if it's definitely not about walking away, but it is about getting people to understand why we do things. The new refurbished model of Recruit RE will certainly have a lot of content around the salaries, around job descriptions, around culture.
Is that an announcement I'm hearing or something like that maybe?
But that people don't know what they don't know. And sometimes we assume that that's right, but it's not.
Yes.
I think that if we're able to give people that information, they're able to make the changes in their business in a better way. There will always be people that will turn over staff a lot higher. There will always be businesses that do have that stigma about them, and maybe they'll change, maybe they won't. I got asked at a conference recently because of my time with Ray White to tell them who had the best culture in Ray White. And I said to them, that would be like me picking a favourite child. We all have one, we just don't talk about it. But the thing is, culture is specific to your business. And so if you are doing that well, that is unique to you, and every person is different. We can't assume that everyone's the same. And I think that is the other challenge, that when we have turnover, we think, well, that person wasn't like that. So I've had a person like this before, so I'm not going to do that again. Well, we can't assume that, because you could be then allowing opportunity to walk out the door.
So I'm glad that Validum got the scoop here on this. So that's all I care about.
Did.
We got the scoop. You heard it here, guys.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Hey, Katie, I've got to ask, you've been such a wealth of knowledge in this pod today, and I know our students and our graduates and anyone listening are going to be blessed to hear your beautiful points of wisdom. But I want to start with what originally pulled you into real estate, and what point did you kind of realise that maybe recruitment was your jam?
It's a bit of a cliche, and we laugh a lot when people say they fall into real estate. But I did. I had a really good friend at the time who was working in recruitment, and I honestly, we've been friends since I had my first baby at 19.
So that was 3 years ago?
Yeah, just a couple of years ago. It was totally fine. And she had a client, and we had always sworn that we would never cross over in that space.
Right.
And I'd had my youngest, who was 10, and she came to me and said, I've got this role. Easy, she said to me, right? The person who's never worked in real estate.
Of course.
She was like, easy money, Katie. This is just, it's going to be a breeze for you.
Sucker.
So I did business-to-business sales for a company called Easy Bond Pay.
Oh, yeah.
They were a premium finance company in South Australia, and they launched the first bond funding platform.
Interesting, yeah.
And so I started as a BDM in that role, looking after Queensland.
Okay.
And funny story, and I'll say this, I had a couple of people from REA come up to me many years later, and they said, you really surprised us. And I said, really? And they said, you became really successful. And we didn't think...
Surprised?
I was like, thank you. Like,
is that a compliment?
Or
is that condescending?
But what they meant by that was I didn't have any industry connections per se.
There you go.
I didn't know anybody. I had to go out there and build every one of these relationships myself.
Wow.
And we ended up with 3,500 real estate businesses across the country using that product.
Wow.
And then we launched one of the first vendor paid advertising.
Right.
So then I became the national business manager for that company.
Yes.
And we did a lot of integrations. So the whole plan at that point, and a lot of my role, was to build the relationships so that the platform is integrated, so it just happens, or it's automatically offered to people.
Okay.
So I spent 4 years with that business.
So really, historically, you've had experience at these platforms and so forth, hence probably why you've had such success with your own now, right?
Yes.
These are foundational roles.
Yes. They are journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a defining moment or decision that shifted you from, working in the industry to all of a sudden now being a business owner?
I always had really strong ambitions to be a business owner, and I was really quite open about that. I've always been very driven. I take my hat, Victor, off to stay-at-home mums. I yell far, far too much to do that role. But I do love working, and I do love having that involvement. So I think as my journey progressed from Remax to Ray White Corporate to Ray White Ascot, that was probably the point for me that I went, I've been growing businesses for people for a really long period of time.
Yep.
And I want to do that for me.
Yeah. Look, I think and hats off to you for doing that too, because it is a big job, setting up your own business and going from where you've been working for. I know you've had some fantastic roles and very high roles as growth, potential roles with Ray White and Remax.
Yeah.
and so forth. So it must have been a big shift for you to change that hat, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're a business owner yourself, and dare I say, welcome to the club. And it is quite a unique club, isn't it? Right?
It's a lonely place.
It is, unfortunately,
right?
yes.
And I don't say that in a bad way, but it is a lonely place. It's very different. And I do often get asked now how I go. I am very social. I love a chat.
Yeah.
You don't call me if you've only got 2 minutes spare. I am not your person, so don't do it. You need 45.
I can attest to that.
You need 45 at minimum, and still it will run over. But that it was a big change. But I think my job at Ray White, particularly in the corporate role, was almost to convince a whole range of people that they don't want to be a business owner, because then if they still decided they want to be one, that's what we want. That creates the drive and energy. So I've never rushed out in the 10 years of being in this space, never rushed out to do that. It was more, what does it look like? How is that going to pan out? And what does the future look like it might shape out to be if I do this?
Growth managers have an illustrious role in regards to, a lot of people think that it's glamorous and going out and having coffees with all these agents and so forth. It's a high pressure role.
Yeah.
And and hats off to you, because you would have been having kids at that time and so forth, and being a woman in a very male dominated industry with a lot of sales. How did you find that?
I rang you on the way here and I told you I was a strong, independent woman and I was lost and I needed help, and I didn't want to do that.
We got you here.
But
I
did it. It is a very male dominant industry. I do think that there is still a lot more males than there are females in terms of those leadership roles. But I do think that it is starting to level out. I think that particularly in the auction space, we're seeing a lot more female auctioneers.
How cool, yeah.
I'm one. I was made to be one, and I've called one auction. I'm a much better keynote speaker than I am an auctioneer. But it is something that I love sharing with people. And I think when we can push other women forward, that is lovely. Now, I'm not pro-female, anti-male in any way, shape or form, but it is harder. It is harder because if for me, I have to do all of those things that everybody else does, but I also have to balance children. I have to drop off kids to school. I have to pick them up if they're sick, if there's a sports day, if there's a cross country, if there's a swimming carnival. None of those things apply to me because all I do is horses. But the thing is, I have to do my job and I have to be a mum.
Yeah.
And respectfully, sometimes when we have support, that doesn't always, there's a bit more flexibility.
It's a balancing act, and that probably should be another podcast we should do, part 2.
Yeah.
Because I think that obviously comes with its own set of sacrifices and responsibilities and juggling as well, that that time management and so forth. You've had some high powered roles too, and this one's probably your biggest challenge, and still you have a relatively young family, and you're balancing horses and family and all the rest of it that go with it, and managing your own business isn't always fun, is it? So
but you do it. People say to me, I don't know how you do it, and I said, well, who else is going to do it? Like, no one's going to feed them. Because,
and you look great doing it.
Yeah,
too,
I just swan around. But it is. I think when you love what you do, you make it work.
Correct.
And I'm very lucky at the moment that there is an element of flexibility when it is your own business, and that certainly wasn't there previous, and that is a big factor.
Yeah.
And I don't say that for the new industry to think that they need to go and open up a business from day one. It's super important that you go on the journey and do that. But over a period of time, that is a natural progression for people to want that flexibility and autonomy, which is why I think it's so important that we add that into businesses now.
Absolutely.
They'll only leave because you don't give them what they what maybe they deserve or what's needed in 2026.
You've got to have a certain DNA for that too, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that you're right. You need those runs on the board before you can go and do that. Otherwise, it can be quite disastrous.
Yeah.
Looking back, what's something that you completely got wrong early, and what shaped you with where you are today, do you think? Because a lot of people are going to watch this and are going to see, an extremely impressive woman who's done a lot in the industry and now running her own show, running her own business and balancing family life and all of those kinds of things. And they're going to go, wow, superwoman. Mm-hmm. But was there something early that you could maybe share wisdom-wise with some of our stakeholders today in regards to some tips and some tricks maybe that got you through?
I think relationships and building relationships. Now, I say that because all of the work is still important. You can't just rely on, if I go back to the Easy Bombay days, I can't just rely on going to a conference and swanning around and talking to people and hoping that that converts. There has to be an element of follow-up or an initial phone call that works there. And I think but you must have the relationships. You know, people need to know who you are. There is no point in just sitting there and smashing out all of these calls per day if there's no return on investment.
Correct.
I think that's a real big learning, and I am very much around being a relationship person. So it's the best tip that I could give someone is look at those. It's not going to do the work for you, but it's certainly going to make those conversations a hell of a lot easier.
I think we undersell it, don't we, in our industry?
Yeah.
That, you know, everyone thinks we're in the business of selling houses, but
Yep.
I think that it's very underestimated, the relationship concept, isn't it? Because if you could sit down with your younger self before entering into real estate, what would be one piece of advice that you'd be knowing that you wish you knew now?
You don't always know. That's like we think we know, and it's okay to ask. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to say, I need a hand. I think our pride gets the better of us sometimes.
Indeed.
And that is probably what would cause more detriment to you than anything else, particularly in the early stages. I talk to a lot of people. A lot of people will reach out to me on social media and ask for some help around, you know, their sales space. And I like to ask questions. And I think it doesn't matter what role you're in, ask questions to understand, because sometimes what you think the issue is not the issue. And again, that's where we fail here in real estate. Any role. You know, if a tenant's angry, we go, oh, they're just angry because the water bill's higher. Well, hang on a second. Like, what's actually caused this, and how do we manage that situation? So I think that's one thing. And it's probably taken me a really long time, because we are proud, but you don't always know. We don't know what we don't know. So lean on people to help you. Ask people.
Surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
You know, that's the secret sauce, isn't it? Some great mentors and so forth. And that's what I love now with social media too. And I think we alluded to off camera a situation that I was recently a part of, and the first person that turned around and said, no one's ever asked for this help before. No one's ever asked that, you know, so, and they just said yes because, you know, and I thought, yeah, of course they're going to say yes, you know, but no one ever asked.
It's the same as door knocking a business that you want to work for. How do you know it's not going to work if you
Correct.
don't do it?
Yeah.
Go and do it.
Yeah.
And if it fails once, it doesn't mean it didn't work.
Absolutely. Total advocate for that.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the converted there. And it is really, really good advice, people. And I think that, you know, if you do want to reach out to Katie too, we'll leave all the details below there and how you can do that. But Katie, this is the kind of conversation really the industry doesn't always like to probably hear about, but it's probably something that we should hear more of.
Yeah.
And I know that we'll get you into a part 2 of the series again at another point, but you've added some great value today to this, and I'll make sure that everyone tries to subscribe to your stuff. And if you want to get in touch with Katie, as I mentioned, and recruit RE, the details will be down in the below, and the Estate of Minds and obviously Validum's socials will be there as well there. But Katie, that's a wrap for us today. And until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and see you on the next pod.